Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes as people continue to join the webinar. We're waiting just another minute or two to get started, but in the meantime, please everyone go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. I think the default setting is to all panelists, so that you're chatting amongst yourselves. Make sure it says to all panelists and attendees in the chat feature. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kaylin King. Thank you everyone for being here today. I am a program officer with the Cultural Investment Portfolio at the Massachusetts Cultural Council. The Cultural Investment Portfolio's focus is grants and services for nonprofit cultural organizations in the state. And we are excited to present today's session, Connecting in the Cloud, Innovations in Audience Engagement in Virtual Performance. This workshop is part of Mass Cultural Council's Recover, Rebuild, and Renew series, which are efforts to help organizations come back from COVID-19. This spring, we're offering 2 free workshops every week through the end of June. And they are about everything from financial management to legal issues, human resources, advocacy, management, and board governance. Our presenters today are from Broadband Collaborative in Arlington, Mass, and we're thrilled to have them. I'll hand it over to them in just a minute, but I want to go over a few ground rules first for today's session. You might have noticed that this session has automatic captioning. Auto-generated captions are provided on all Mass Cultural Council Zoom meetings and webinars. And to request additional accommodations to ensure your participation for this or future webinars, feel free to message us in the chat or to let us know when you register ahead of the next one. If it's distracting for you to have the captions at the bottom of your screen, there is a setting to hide them by clicking Hide Subtitles in the closed captioning options at the bottom of Zoom. We are hoping to have a very active chat today. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and introduce yourselves. Feel free to share comments and anecdotes throughout. But if you have questions for the panelists, please do use the Q&A feature in Zoom so your question doesn't get lost in the chat. This session is being recorded and will be available on the council's website and YouTube channel afterwards, along with all of the other Recover, Renew, and Rebuild sessions. And you'll get an email from us when this is ready, along with other resources from today's session. My colleague, Cheyenne Cohn-Postel, is here and will be providing those resources in the chat box. Feel free to message either of us if you're having technical difficulties with the session today. Today's session is going to run for about 90 minutes, including time for question and answers. And with that, I will turn it over to Kristen Canterbury Bagnall, Sarah Stackhouse, and their guest, Bobby Steinbach.
Hi there. Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be with you all today. I'm Bobby Steinbach, and I'm a theater artist. I act, I direct, and I teach.
And I'm Sarah Stackhouse. I'm a founder and a partner at Broadband Collaborative, and we are a small women owned business that focuses on expanding possibilities for artists and arts organizations. And we've done a lot in the virtual space this past year. We're glad to be with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Canterbury Bagnall, also a founder and partner at Broadband Collaborative, and we are glad to be with you. Bobby, Sarah, and I are doing this webinar together because a year ago this month, so April 2020, we created a virtual streaming show called All Together Now. The show ran for 26 episodes through August 2020. It streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and was seen by over 40,000 people on 6 continents. So we are here to share our learnings from that experience and from a variety of other virtual experiences that Sarah will tell you about. Just one technical note, we suggest that you watch in gallery view for the best viewing experience. Also, we will be sharing video, which is always a slight risk in Zoom. It may not be a perfect viewing experience, but it'll give you a sense of illustration of what we're talking about. And we will share links afterwards in case people want to see the videos directly on their own computer rather than through Zoom. Sarah?
Yeah, so Kristen mentioned All Together Now, which was actually our first foray into full-on virtual performance and programming. And I just wanted to say a word about what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, we were in this moment of all of us together and everyone here. Everything shut down. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody quite knew how to do performance. And Kristen sent me a message and said, I think artists and audiences are going to need some way to gather the way you do around a fire or a living room or a concert hall and share stories and music during this time. We need it. Let's create something. And it sounded so easy. Um, but we jumped in and we actually had an incredibly steep learning curve. But we worked with 75 artists over 6+ months, right? About 6 months, a little more than 6 months, maybe. And we learned so many skills. We also listened to artists in this moment and audiences. So it's a real privilege and a gift to just get to talk to so many artists and audiences in that moment about what they were thinking, what kind of content they wanted to make, what they were yearning for, what was working, what was hard. And that's helped shape the additional virtual projects we've done. And I would say that whole experience was like a masterclass for us in virtual performance. In addition to All Together Now, I've spent a lot of the year in the virtual space, and my kids will tell you I can't work the remote and I really can't work the coffee maker. So they find it really funny that now my life is creating streaming shows and editing and virtual theater, but it was part of the time we're in and it was what was required. And so that's what we've learned to do. And some of the things that we'll talk about later today, but that I've been involved with just to give a little orientation is I work closely with Arlekin Players Theater, which is a Russian theater in Needham. And they did a project that went viral in May called Natasha, well, the state versus Natasha Benina. And that's been a huge learning experience. I've also done a bunch of online fundraisers for clients like Children's Hope India, which is an international group, and one for Beyond Classical Theater, which was in honor of Johnny Lee Davenport, who passed away from our theater community. And then most recently, Kristen and I have been producing a new show called Latitudes, where we worked with artists from a bunch of different disciplines and cultural backgrounds to create a performance experience that's virtual, that's about this moment. So those are some of the things we're going to draw from as we talk today. And I know Bobby's had quite a few virtual performance experiences as well. Do you want to share a couple of yours, Bobby, before we get started?
Yeah, I have, and I never expected to be so busy with artistic pursuits during the pandemic, but I have been, I continue to be, and I'm very grateful for that. Um, a few things, for instance, at present, I'm in post production for a film I directed of a beautiful play, 100 Words for Snow. featuring my longtime 16-year-old student actor, Mia, and my brilliant partner on that project, Justin LaHue, who is running the tech for this webinar. And we're now in post-production. I'm also working on 2 anti-racist practices committees for local theater companies and creating art for a virtual gallery in a BU class I'm attending, Race, Prison, Justice, Illuminating Stories Through the Arts. And I'm also rehearsing for one 10-minute play and directing another for the Boston Theater Marathon, one 10-minute play a day virtually for 50 days. It began today on the Boston Playwrights Theater platform. And we raise money with those plays for the Theater Community Benevolent Fund. Last year, the virtual event raised over $50,000 and gave financial support to many theater folks in need during the pandemic. So yeah, I'm too busy, but it's great.
Thanks, Bobby.
You're welcome.
So the 3 of us are here today to share what we've learned through these different virtual experiments. We want to acknowledge at the outset that, as Sarah mentioned, we're all learners in the virtual space, and it's been a steep learning curve. As grateful as we are to MCC to have this platform and this opportunity to share our experiences and what we've learned, we also want to acknowledge that we're part of a rich community of people creating content, and we are eager to learn from you as well. We'd love to hear more about what you've been doing in the virtual space, and throughout the workshop, we'll be inviting you to share your experiences in the chat. First 2 questions, I want to thank AHA in New Bedford for already responding to this question. Have you or your organization produced virtual content during the pandemic? If yes, why? If no, why not? And do you expect to produce virtual content once you go back to live presenting? Sarah's putting the questions in the chat. Please respond as we go along, and we'll come back and share a summary of what we learned from this.
Yeah, I love the first answer already. Yes and no. That's how we all feel. Yes and no. Yeah. Thank you, Jody. Okay, so while Kristen takes a look at what the chat and things that are coming in there to pull from, I want to just go over 4 topics that we hope to cover today that are based on our experience. Justin, can you pop up a slide for us so we can take a look at that? All right, so these are our 4 topics. One is about embracing limitations and possibilities. So as much as we think about this time of isolation and virtual work as limiting, it's actually full of possibilities. And that's a kind of reframe that we'd like to use today. There are tools and there are opportunities in the virtual performance space that are not available live. And I think it's important that we think about those and maximize on those to create new experiences. The second one is about how you create a shared live experience, which means presenting live does not mean the same thing online as it does in person. It is possible to show something that's pre-existing, but have it feel live and create a live experience. And we want to talk about that. Number 3, I think is important because it's about not being bound by formats, lengths, structures that we usually use, but to experiment in this time and do what works. And one of the things that we have found works is listening to artists. What do they need to make? Who do they want to communicate with? What are they doing? And then try new structures and formats and things to support that work. So we're going to touch on that. And then finally, where do I start? And many of you may have a ton of experience with this. You may know things we don't know, but there may be others who don't have any idea where to start. So we want to spend a little time talking about accessible technical tips for successful producing and marketing and connecting with audiences online. So over the next 90 minutes, we'll touch on each of those, share some videos and share some of your feedback and hopefully have a great conversation. Let's move. Yeah, let's move on.
Well,
And
Sarah,
yeah.
You mentioned there are tools and possibilities in the virtual format that aren't available live. Can you talk a little more about that for us?
Yeah. I mean, the first one is fairly obvious, but if you think about what an opportunity it is, it's pretty amazing, which is the accessibility piece. Geography goes away. You can watch from anywhere. You can tune in for things that are asynchronous anytime. You can be in a room with somebody from Peru and from Russia at the same time. That is something that is not possible live. It's also an accessibility piece where you don't have to get a babysitter and park. You can just turn it on. So that is actually an opportunity. Another thing that we found is that the hierarchy is really disrupted during COVID. Everybody was sitting at home with the same problem. Jimmy Fallon couldn't work his Zoom and neither could I. People who normally are on tour were canceled and we're just sitting there. So there's opportunity to connect with people that you normally can't connect to and to access them. That is changing a little bit now. It is reemerging. But it is still true that in this genre of connecting, there's a different hierarchy and we can exploit that. Obviously, things you all know, there's video, there's effects, there's multiple views, there's chats, there's polls, there's all these tools that you don't have in a live concert hall. And those create opportunity. And the final thing is the amount of intimacy. You're seeing us up close and personal, we're chatting live. That's been true whether you're looking at Meryl Streep or at Sarah Stackhouse. And that kind of intimacy has really made a difference. Yeah. Kristen, is there anything you want to pull out of the chat?
Yeah, just for, I think this is a particularly exciting room to be in because so many people are doing virtual performance, which is really exciting. And generally people who responded to the question expect to keep doing a version of it as we go back into reality. So we hoped that would be the case. And a lot of what we'll talk about today is, while we learned it during COVID, is applicable for virtual programming going forward. And for whatever it's worth, that your experience mirrors ours, we also expect to continue to do some virtual programming going forward. I want to name one thing that is different about Broadband's experience than many of the people attending the webinar. Broadband was a new company at the beginning of COVID, so we had the luxury of inventing in this moment rather than reinventing. We didn't have an audience that was looking to us for specific content. We could completely define what kind of relationship we wanted to have with audience. So I just want to name that, particularly for people who feel this is a steep learning curve. If you were trying to figure out how to continue to be responsible for a number of things and add virtual to your plate, we had the luxury of just focusing on virtual. So I just want to acknowledge that that definitely helped with the steep learning curve. Yeah, so one other thing that we learned working in the virtual space, because we can't actually all be in the same room at the same time, what goes into creating the feeling of live performance is different. We found that for straightforward performance, it was more effective to work live to tape, which a couple of people also mentioned in the chat. It's nice to see Odyko here, Arlington's own Odyko. It's the same way Sarah mentioned Jimmy Fallon. This is how the late night shows work. They're not actually there at 11:30 at night or 8:30 Pacific time. It's recorded earlier in the day and then broadcast at that time. We followed a similar format. We would tape continuously, use very limited editing so that the feel was live, but the video was created in advance, which limited some of the technical issues that can come up if the video is being created and streamed simultaneously. There are also, of course, works that include an audience participation element, and those truly run live. Sarah's going to talk about one of those. She mentioned Arlequin Players Theater's State versus Natasha Bonina. And Sarah, I think you're coming to us live from Arlequin Players Theater today, aren't you?
I'm in the dressing room right now. You can see I'm in their dressing room. Yeah, so I work with Arlequin, and if you guys haven't discovered Arlequin, I just really suggest that you do, because it's been a total treat for me to find them. I started working with Arlequin a few years ago. They were doing all Russian plays in Russian for Russian audiences, and they were largely unknown to the American theater audience, but their work was really spectacular. And over the past 2 years, they started working in English and had just kind of broken through. They got a bunch of Elliot Nortons last year. They had done a Seagull in English, and the COVID hit. And what happened in that moment was really fascinating. The founder of Arlequin, Igor Golyak, and his wife, Daria, who had just won Best Actress in Boston, put their baby to bed, put the dog in the bedroom, shoved their couch over, and Igor hacked together like 8 different softwares, and they created in a virtual theater piece that was live. And it was about a Russian orphan who had created a crime of passion. And she's in her cell talking to the security cameras, to the jury, which is us, the audience. So it had to be live because she would talk to Bobby, she would talk to Kristen, and we voted at the end on her guilt and innocence. And it gave some agency to the audience that created a, you know, when you go to the theater or a concert and it's never going to be the same again, that particular performance is just unique. It created that feeling. Yeah, so that was an incredible learning curve and it went viral. And speaking of geography, the New York Times came. When would the New York Times come to a non-equity Russian production in Needham, but during COVID? And it got a critic's pick. So suddenly this tiny theater has exploded and we ended up touring this piece all over the world. Bobby, you saw it, right?
I did. I saw it twice, once in English and once in Russian, Darya's native language, with subtitles. And I mean, it was incredibly inspiring to see how Darya just reached through that small screen and grabbed people. Of course, I had the best seat in the house, as all the viewers did. And the technical aspects were so innovative. So that we're going to show you video now, and it shows the actress Darya Denisova playing Natasha, a 16-year-old Russian orphan, in her pajamas in black and white, and then she ducks off screen before she starts talking about her dreams. And when she comes back on, she's in color. She's in her prison cell talking to the jury, pleading her case through security cameras. The jury's us, the audience, on Zoom. Justin, let's roll that video, please.
And then Valera asks me, Natasha, what is your dream? Greg, what is your dream? Abigail, do you have a dream? Elizabeth, do you have a dream? Maggie, what is your dream? Nick Featherstone, do you have a dream? Judy Alter, what is your dream? That's when I realized this was the guy. Because before that, nobody ever asked me if I had a dream. And this guy just up and flat out asks me.
I made it the way it is specifically for Zoom so that it would make sense, so it would justify your presence. Otherwise, we could just record it and send you a video.
I, of course, like probably majority of theater people haven't had lots of experience with Zoom and acting on camera specifically with Zoom. So it was challenging in the beginning. But then I think it somehow started working because I know that you guys are there. I know that you see me and I see you. And there's this energy exchange, which is, I don't know, it's magic. I don't know how it happens.
Just as compelling as the first time, and the second time I could watch it over and over again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say the reason we're sharing this clip is that Igor has talked a lot about why he feels virtual theater needs to have a live element and the audience has to have a role so that everybody's active in that moment to create a unique shared experience. And one of the things that happened in Natasha's, there were polls that you could respond to and you had to do the verdict. And the verdict was not always the same. So then there'd be a different ending. Or depending on the people in the audience, like one night we had a whole Russian audience and the talkback became all about Russian orphans. Whereas when we did talkbacks with other countries, sometimes the issues would be about, you know, why was it just a yes or no verdict? There would be different kinds of discussions depending on who was in the audience and what had happened live. And so in the case of Arlequin, their thinking is, you don't create plays that should have been in person and put them online. You create plays for this new medium that only work in this new medium. And that's been kind of an exciting discovery that we wanted to share. And it works. So one of the things we wanted to ask you all is, what have you seen that works? What have you seen virtually that moved you or excited you? Or have you performed in or produced something that audiences have really responded to? And what were the elements that made it work online? In Arlequin's case, we talked about audience participations and agency. So I'm going to just add those questions to the chat, and we'd love to see any comments that you have about that. And while people add their experiences to the chat, Bobby, I know you've done a number of live performances, live to audience, and we've heard from Daria about her experience. What was your experience?
Well, I I recently got to play Jaques in As You Like It with Actors Shakespeare Project company members and students from BU and Boston Conservatory, and All the World's a Stage is certainly pertinent here and now. And if not for COVID, I don't think I would have gotten to play Juliet. Sarah says I've been Juliet all my life. Tyrese, my wonderful Romeo, was in Atlanta. So there was no chance for physical connection, and we actually still haven't met in person. It was a welcome challenge, and rising to a challenge is part of artistic practice, of course. I mean, it would have been delicious to actually dance with Tyrese and have him hold me in his arms in this virtual rendition. Just his gaze and the bard's poetry inspired me and made it feel so very real.
Mm, that's beautiful, Bobby. I got to see part of that Juliet performance. So a couple things in the chat have come up. Recommendation for Liars and Believers, who did A Winter's Tale. Puppetry, talkbacks, participation, voting, acknowledgement of the audience. Those are key elements. Thank you for that, Julie. And Ellen said, I saw a performance with Jason Alexander and Patty Lapone online from Berkshire Theater Company. I'm pretty sure it was recorded, but it was remarkable how well everything was coordinated. No one was in the same room, but it felt like they were. And Jonathan says, that was us, Barrington Stage. So yay. Great. It was actually Barrington Stage. All right. So feel free to add other things. It's a kind of a chance to crowdsource and learn from each other. And I want to go back now, Kristen, because I was talking about live experience, and so was Bobby, and so are these things in the chat. But you said earlier, it's not always possible to perform live or desirable, but it is possible to create a live feeling, like a sense of event, whether your artists are live or not. Can you talk about some of the practice that we developed of creating the feeling of live when we did All Together Now and other programs?
Absolutely. And just to say, MCC will gather all the different things that people suggest in the chat, as well as what we're sharing today. So we'll share out, as Sarah said, a crowdsourced collection of things people might be interested in after the webinar. So I want to go back to what Julie said in the chat, actually, about the value of acknowledging the audience. In all the different virtual performance we've been part of, we put a lot of emphasis on community and being in relationship, which of course any of us would in any performance. But so what I'm going to share is the ways we've learned to do that virtually. We try to create a lobby beforehand. We have an active chat, just as we're asking all of us to do together today. Someone from our organization is always responding and making connections, as Sarah is right now. We pin people's comments, react to the performance, and react to each other's comments, so that even though audience members can't see and hear each other, they are having a shared experience. In talkbacks, we use people's names, or if possible, have them ask their own questions. You'll notice today, every time we bring in a technical element, we do that in relationship with Justin. That's not invisible or magic. That is a human being doing that, and his name is Justin. All of that is meant to make us all present to each other. And we do the same thing backstage. When we do a taping, we gather the artists ahead of time, have some conversation, and just in general, create an environment in which people are invited to be present for each other. That way, at a taping, even though there isn't an external live audience, people are performing for each other. Finally, one of the best tools that we found for being in relationship with the audience is something that we're also modeling here today. Have a gorgeous, appealing host. You may have noticed that in this format, Bobby is driving the conversation forward. She's curious, warm, keeps things moving, and she's always reacting. That was Bobby's role on All Together Now. And we thought it was incredibly important because if you think back to last April, that was very early in lockdown. To the degree that there was performance available, it was usually one artist to a camera in a room by themselves. So there was a way that the form was reinforcing the experience of isolation. Part of what we wanted to do with All Together Now was disrupt that feeling of isolation. We have a video that illustrates this with the guitarist Claudio Ragazzi and his experience of performing for Bobby as the representative of the audience. This video from All Together Now shows a Latinx man in a black shirt performing solo guitar in front of a red curtain and a computer monitor, followed by that same man in conversation with Bobby, a white woman wearing a black sweater. Justin, can we show that video, please?
Really important. And, you know, I feel like, Claudia, I have learned so many things from you in this conversation, and I certainly would like to continue that. It's just been a true pleasure, and I hope to see you soon again, actually face to face, vis-a-vis.
I hope we do, and I really, you know, I mean, I give you a lot of credit, you and the whole production team, for coming up with these very creative ways of sharing art and music, you know, in a community way. On the other hand, and I think some of these things they're here to stay. You know, I think there's a lot of positive on these new technologies and new forms of sharing, but at the same time, there's nothing. I was just, you know, thinking about that as I was playing to a certain degree. The fact that I'm playing in front of you, you know, just now, you know, whatever I played just a few minutes ago, and I have this small audience, it makes a big deal. It's a big difference for any performer to be in front of a real audience, like a human audience. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, that was the extraordinary guitarist Claudio Ragazzi and our gorgeous, appealing host, Bobby Steinbach. I just want to deconstruct and name what was happening here again quickly, which is just Bobby created an atmosphere that invited artists to be vulnerable, and we know how important that is. And then she responded in real time, just as you were, which made everyone feel connected. And having an audience changes things. Bobby, what practices did you develop to create that atmosphere and that sense of connection, especially as you had to stand in for the whole audience? How did you approach?
Well, thank you, Kristen and Sarah, for your generous and kind words. The most invigorating and hopeful project for me during the pandemic was being given the opportunity to host All Together Now. And it was a steep learning curve for me as well. I very much relied on my curiosity about people and my love for the creative hearts and souls of artists. Their generosity was astonishing. So I just responded from my heart with tears or laughter, joy. I fell in love with the artists and what they so generously gave us in this time of need for love and connection. And though there was always a script, I was not constrained to follow it, and I could really respond viscerally and emotionally.
Yeah, and I think I just want to give a shout out for heart over polish. I think in the virtual medium, you know, like we've had some glitches today, right? You know, and here we are, but it's personal, and it makes you feel like you're part of something that's live. And I think the thing you said most often, Bobby, if I remember, after those performances was, "Oh, my heart," like every week, "Oh, my heart." So, yeah.
Having Bobby as our host was one of the key elements that also allowed us to straddle being planful and being in the moment, which I think is also key in virtual space, because when something unexpected happened, when happened all the time, Bobby could respond on screen in real time and adjust while we were adjusting and responding behind the scenes. So having all of those bases covered made a huge difference in being able to feel like we could manage whatever came our way.
Yeah.
Not all contents or formats obviously lend themselves to having a gorgeous, amazing host, and not everyone is fortunate enough to have a Bobby. But I think what you hear in Bobby's practices and in what Sarah talked about with the emphasis on relationship and building community is how important it is to be thinking about the shared experience and how you're making that connection visible and visceral for audiences, even though many of the tools that we usually use to do that aren't available to us.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of community, something wonderful happened among a number of the artists who appeared on All Together Now and met on the shows. Some of them from all parts of the globe are coming together and sharing their artistry and creating work together. And I just want to say one more thing. I'm available as a gorgeous and appealing host if anyone needs me. Carry on, Kristen.
Now everyone has a Bobby. So this, not that last point, but right before it gets to something else we learned. So our consistent experience, much like our experience in the live world, the non-virtual world, remember that, creating performance frames and scaffolds and then being led by artists results in great content. We have 2 clips that we want to show from All Together Now that really illustrate that point. Bobby, do you want to tell us about the performance from Bree Black? I know that one was particularly vivid for you.
Yeah. As you will hear from Bree, the opportunity for her to create a special piece for All Together Now was the impetus that unblocked her creative juices. In this next video clip, I am talking with Bree, who is a young African-American violinist with some very cool blue hair. I went right out and dyed mine, as she sits in front of a sparkly curtain hung in her bedroom, where she then plays her song for us. Can we see that video, please, Justin?
So I actually wrote a song specifically for the show. When I got asked to join you guys, I was in a place where I wasn't able to be creative because of coronavirus. I was feeling kind of lost, kind of hopeless, especially as a full-time violinist. My income is completely gone. I'm actually having to move back with my parents. So for me, it felt like the world was ending, and I was actually pretty shy about doing the live shows just because of the sound issues. So I wrote this song, all of that to say, I wrote this song for you guys and for the world, just to remember in this time of trouble and craziness that we all have each other and we're all going through the same thing and we're all in this together. So this song is called Not Alone, and yes. You got me, I got you. 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 You got me.
Oh, Bree Black, you got me.
Oh, thank you.
You got me, my dear. That was just so moving. It just made me even cry. So unique and moving and beautiful. And that's what it's all about right now. Yes.
Thank you so much. I put a lot into that song. And just at a time when I'm feeling hopeless, just to write those words was inspiring. So thank you, Bobby, for having me and motivating me to come out of my box, come out of my shell, and look at the positives of the situation.
Yes.
Oh, that was a wonderful moment. And she's a stellar artist. You should check her out. But it was beautiful when she came alive artistically and created a new work for us, and for all the audience watching all over the world. And that happened more and more as the show went on. And so I think this idea of new work in the virtual space becoming possible is something interesting to think about. And how do you create the conditions and structures and formats that are different, that Kristen mentioned, to let that happen? We have one more clip of a new work just because it's so interesting. This is a piece called The Season of Miss Annabelle Reese. And it was created by actress and playwright Anne Gottlieb and dancer Ali Ross last spring, responding to the exact moment they were in the pandemic. And they had never met. And I don't even know if they've still met in person. They were in two different places, but we connected them because we thought they were similar artists. And they both created this piece and they performed it live. In this clip, Ali Ross, who's a slim, small, lithe dancer with shoulder-length brown hair and a sky blue blazer, is standing in front of her house and her porch in her garden live. And we don't see Anne, we just hear her voice from a different location live as she tells the story of Annabelle Reese. And we watch Ali dance on the pavement, up the stairs, across her porch, spin over the railing to the ground, and dance among the intoxicating flowers in the early evening. Let's watch that one.
Press release for immediate release, May 7th, 2020. Miss Annabelle Reese lives on the corner of Lowell and Porter with 2 children, a man, and several screens. At approximately 7:14 in the evening, she was overtaken by the scent of a yellow magnolia. The scent brought back the conversation she had had with a neighbor in full view of the parked cars and pavement. The neighbor blurted out, "My friend is gone. He went with the Buddha's moon. I want him back, to come back like spring." Miss Annabelle Reese tried to avoid this exchange. There were needs to feed, children, screens, man. The neighbor spoke as if the 2 women had known each other a very long time. Miss Annabelle Reese could feel the woman's voice inside her own head. Does someone teach us to let go of a friend? Let in the spring? Is it better to burn or easier to spin? There are conflicting reports. Was it the scent of magnolia or the unanswerable questions that inflamed her dizziness? After many attempts to cover her mouth, the fire erupted inside Miss Annabelle Reese. At approximately 7:16, she fell into the arms of her neighbor, who whispered, "Things burn themselves up in the fall, not the spring. We came too close to the animals' habitat and stole things. We have become confused. The seasons are not."
You know, seeing that again makes me so emotional because it is so evocative of what so many people were going through at the time and still going through. The isolation, the loneliness, the fear, the loss, and it's a beautiful way to share those feelings together. Sarah, now that we've mentioned a couple ways to think about content, shall we talk about uh, how people can get their content out to audiences?
Yeah, and I'd like to start by saying video on Zoom is not the best way. As you've seen from today, and I'm still glad we shared the clips because I think that we're having a live experience together and you get a sense, but there are so many wonderful platforms and tools now available. And again, you may know some that we don't know. And if so, put them in the chat because we'll make a resource list for everybody who's come. I'm going to talk a little bit about platforms, softwares, subscriptions, things like that, and some tips about how to do this well, especially if you're brand new to it. You all probably know that there is Facebook Live, but there are a lot of things you can do with Facebook Live, and I want to touch on them. So you can stream live to the void, or with someone there as a host, you can just turn it on and stream live. But you can also upload a video, which most of us do regularly. The other thing you can do is you can create a premiere. So you can upload a video, but it doesn't show, and then it premieres at a specific time. And that creates a sense of event. You can have everybody gather at 7 p.m. waiting to watch it, and it just plays at 7. And so that instant premiere is a really great feature. And if you haven't played with it, you should check it out. YouTube has the same options. You can stream live, you can upload for anybody to watch anytime, or you can set an instant premiere or a premiere that's 3 days from now and it'll turn on. What's fun about doing that on YouTube is if you set a premiere for Saturday at 6, at about 6:30, you start to see people waiting in the waiting room. You can like see this, it's like seeing a line outside. You start to see people, like the numbers go, there's 11 people, there's 22 people. And you know everybody's together and you can start chatting and then the show starts. Technically, YouTube has fairly high res video and Facebook compresses it a lot. So if you're really looking for beautiful high res audio and video, YouTube is a better way to go, or Vimeo, than Facebook. But there are some benefits to Facebook too that I'll come back to in a minute. I wanted to mention that we worked with Twitch when we did All Together Now. I didn't even know what Twitch was. Probably some of you do, but maybe not. And Bobby every night would say Twitch, and she'd like twitch her body as a joke. Twitch is a gaming platform primarily. It's a place that a lot of young people go to watch each other play video games, but it's very interactive. You can stream live to it, and there's an active chat, and there's a different demographic there. So there are these emerging platforms that are very big that aren't necessarily thought of as performing arts platforms, but they're becoming performing arts platforms. And I just encourage you to go check them out, play with them, go watch somebody play a video game, find a performing arts thing and see if it might be right for your current audience or a new virtual theater audience that you might want to have. Obviously, you can use Zoom. A lot of people have been using Zoom. It works fine for talking. It does not work for singing. You can't have two people doing something at once. It only takes one audio feed at a time. So you've probably had the experience in meetings where you try to talk and somebody else is talking. You only hear one of you. You don't hear both of you. So it's limited. It's actually possible to turn your Zoom into a stream. You can take your Zoom and stream it to YouTube. You can stream it straight to YouTube. Oh, I see the Phoenix Orchestra has been streaming to Twitch. Right on. That's awesome. One thing that a lot of theaters are doing for people who are a little more sophisticated with their production values is setting up a bunch of design cues or images using OBS. And you can actually in real time push those cues so that you are actually using the rhythm of the live to run cues that you're pre-existing like you would in a theater. So OBS is something you can explore if that's interesting to you. I want to talk about streaming services. There are a bunch and you can search and try them out. Last year I used OneStream for a bunch of things. When we were using OneStream, I would upload a video to OneStream and I could, like for Children's Hope India, which I did a bunch of work for, we wanted to stream to multiple platforms in different time zones. So I could upload one video and say, stream to this YouTube channel in India at this time and stream the same video to the US audience on Facebook at this time. And I could just set it all up and it would just go. That's awesome. And it's fun to play with. As we've been doing our current show at Broadband that Kristen and I are doing, it's called Latitudes. There's a pre-taped segment and then there's a talkback. And we did not want to use Zoom because the production values, as you saw with that last video, it can be sticky. So what we've been working with StreamYard, and what StreamYard allows you to do is have up to 10 people in the room. You can stream your video to YouTube and then instantly switch over to a talkback without switching links, without sending people somewhere else. You can pop up comments, you can pop up lower thirds, and there's more and more things coming on every day. And so if that's something you've been thinking about, go check out one of those and go on and try it. And I think experimentation is key. Get another person on with you, pull up a video, try it, try different things. That's how you learn it. It changes. As we were using StreamYard, and Justin is our StreamYard expert. Thank you, Justin. He would say, that doesn't work yet. And then 3 days later, he'd be like, they just brought it online, so now we can do it. So this field is evolving super fast, and just try things. 2 more tips. One is about looking good and sounding good. Light yourself from the front. Do not do overhead light because you get shadows underneath. If you do light from behind, you look like a silhouette. So front light, a lamp or a ring light from the front makes you feel so much more professional and so much more seen. Earbuds, headphones can make a really big difference for you. Get near your router. Turn off all your other internet things. If someone's downloading a movie at the same time in your house, tell them to stop and plug into your Ethernet. These are all things we learned the hard way, and they really help. They may be really obvious or they may be new to you, and we just wanted to share them. And the last thing is have a sense of humor, because something's going to go wrong. And even if you think you've thought of everything, a new thing is going to go wrong. And that's just part of it. We're in an experimental time. Right, Kristen?
That is really true. I would say the most valuable thing we learned was that we could not imagine all the different things that could go wrong in the early days of All Together. Now, every time something went wrong, Sarah and I would say to each other, okay, now we know about that, and now we know how to deal with it. And actually, no, there was always something more. So we learned that we had to have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C and a communications plan that matched to each of them, because as we were changing the plan in real time, we had to have a way to let audience know what was happening. So for example, what will you do if you start a stream and the platform doesn't accept it? We had that happen with Facebook. And as we're panicking and screaming, our technical person is saying, yeah, sometimes Facebook, like, they do updates and they don't accept streams. Did not know that was a thing. Turns out it is. So in that case, so what we learned to do was try to have pre-recorded content that was uploaded on the platform, so we could go with that if we needed to. Also, if you're running on multiple platforms, you can tell everyone to leave Facebook and go to YouTube. That's also a good option. And then this is where it comes in really handy to have someone manning the chat, so that as one group of people is solving the problem technically, there's someone else who's responsible for communicating with the audience. We also always have a text chain with the people involved in the production when we're streaming, so that we can be talking to them also in real time, so that you're not getting 100 texts saying, isn't it supposed to be happening now? You're proactively telling them why what was supposed to be happening isn't, and what the awesome thing is that's going to happen instead. Once we got out of the mindset that it was possible to anticipate every problem and learn that we really had to be prepared for the completely unexpected, it got easier. And our consistent experience was that audiences were inclined to be generous, that people understand that this is a different time and that none of us are living in a reliable reality. And so we were generous with them and they were generous with us. And that was a beautiful part of the experience. So Sarah,
yes,
how can people let audiences know about the fabulous content they're creating? What about marketing?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about marketing, but I first have to tell you that during one of our shows, when everything went technically perfectly, a dog unplugged somebody's router and we had to retape. You just never know what's going to happen. Okay, just had to share that little story. So this webinar is actually talks about innovative ways to connect with audiences. I don't know how innovative they are. I think that they are, though, in a different context. You have to think about them differently, and that's what we've learned. So I'm going to share a couple of things. Now, a lot of you have subscriber lists, e-blasts, you have an established way of communicating with people. And so I'm sure you're making use of that. But even if you are, how do you rise above the fray when every single company is sending out those things? And if you don't have that and you have to create your own audience, how do you do it? And I think there's this sense that if you just make something good, people will come and watch it. Sometimes, often it's how do you get your people there and their people there and their parents there and their parents' friends there? You have to build it. And there are ways to do it virtually that are different tools. So one thing is, I just want to talk about the concentric circles of, I tell all of my people on social, not on the broadband page, I'm going to put it there, but on my personal page. And then 10 people that I love put it on their page. That's how you start to get people to follow you. All of the artists in your program should be sending out their own personal things, because that's who comes to watch. You go and watch the people you know or the things you love, and something has to pique your interest in order for you to do that. There is a conventional wisdom that you have to see something 3 times in order for it to stick. So the idea that you send a note and then you send a reminder is good. And we often do countdowns. Next week, tomorrow, tonight, in 60 minutes, and it allows people to be like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And there's a sense of event about it. It's not like, oh yeah, I need to watch that sometime. It's like, that's happening in an hour. I want to be part of it. So we really encourage both the personal circles, the concentric circles, and the countdown. Another thing, and Bobby, I want to say, was fantastic at this. Bobby's an extrovert like I am. And she would take a show that she loved and write her own personal note and send it to like 60 people. And the nights that she did that, our numbers went up. We saw it. One of the things that I love to do is cross stream. And some people are afraid of cross streaming. We recently co-produced a fundraiser for an organization called Beyond Classical Theater. And some of you here may have known the late, great African-American actor, Johnny Lee Davenport, who worked all over the country and did a lot of good for Black actors in the classical theater. And he was a dear friend of ours, and he passed away a year ago. And his wife decided to start an organization in his honor called Beyond Classical Theater to raise scholarship funds for actors of color to study classical theater. And they asked Broadband to co-produce with them. And we talked to them about cross streaming. And at first they were like, well, what is it? And we want it to be on our website because it's our content. And we want to make sure that the branding stays with Beyond Classical Theater. But after some conversation, what we decided to do was to actually bust out of that and make it a theater community event and try to get people from across the entire Boston theater community and beyond involved. So we reached out to the Lyric, Speakeasy, Gloucester Stage, New Rep, Shakespeare and Company, Actor Shakespeare Project, all of these theaters who knew Johnny. And they all said, oh yes, we'll cross stream with you. So I figured out how to set it up. It's not that hard on Facebook. You do a few steps under settings and you invite people to cross stream. And what it means is when you show your show on your page, it shows on all their pages as well. And that means that all of the people who follow them, if they're on social media, they see it start and they're like, oh, what's this? And they turn it on. And we had an overwhelming number of audience members and donations. And it created this sense of community, of like, it was a live event that the whole theater community was doing together. And we could see everybody chatting and donating, and cross streaming became a critical strategy. When we first talked about producing, I think they were thinking about how we'd edit the video for them. But in fact, the cross streaming, I think, was the thing that made that event work. I want to just share a quick minute from that show, because not only did we work to cross stream across theaters for promotions, but actors from around the country who had been mentored by Johnny created a collective piece. So there was a lot of thinking about how do you bring people together in different ways. And we're going to share just a minute of the shared monologue. In this video, you will see a number of young Black artists who were mentored by Johnny Lee Davenport in a shared monologue from The Tempest.
Now, I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair. Unless
I be relieved by prayer.
I be relieved by prayer.
By prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults.
Which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults.
Mercy itself.
And frees all faults.
As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free.
As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free.
Let your indulgence set me free.
Set me free.
Set me free.
Set me free.
Let your indulgence set me free.
Let your indulgence set me free.
Oh my, what an extraordinary evening that was. And one of the very special elements was how much we all felt, and we put it in the chat too, that Johnny Lee Davenport was with us in spirit. So now I think we have time for some questions and comments, and we encourage you to share something you've learned doing virtual programming or a question you might have, and please, please don't be shy.
Yeah, and while we wait for anything you put in the chat, and then in a minute we'll bring in Kaylin from the MCC who can share anything that's been sent to Q&A, if there is anything. I want to go back to something that Jody Stevens was saying earlier, that Facebook did not allow you to live stream your event. And I just want to say, we feel you. That has happened many times. And I just want to encourage people, if you are thinking of streaming something, whether it's pre-recorded or live, have at least 2 backup plans. Have a video on YouTube that's ready for an instant premiere, so that if Facebook doesn't work, you can say, go to this link, or have a slide ready that says, we will be back in 30 minutes or something, so that you don't get caught in that position, because it just feels horrible. And at the same time, everybody's very generous, as Kristen said.
Yeah.
Steve, my friend Steve, what's your experience with audience attention span and the ideal duration of events? I'd actually love both of your take on that. Bobby, do you have a thought about audience attention span and what keeps their attention span and what kind of length works online?
Well, I think, you know, our shows really were around anywhere from 20 minutes to 45 minutes on altogether now. And because the content was so varied and was also performance and discussion and interviews that I did with the artists, I think people were quite engaged and very hungry for content and for connection and for art. So, you know, this webinar is what, an hour and a half, and it has a lot of content here. But for me, just listening and watching, it's so varied, and the responses we're getting from our viewers here, our attendees, are also so very interesting, that I think it depends. It depends on what the content is, and it depends on what you are looking for.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
thoughtful. Yeah, Kristen.
The series, to chime in on what Bobby was saying, the series that Broadband is doing now called Latitudes, we're doing 8 evenings where an individual artist is creating work in this moment and for the virtual space. And those are running between 45 and 60 minutes. The conversation we're having with artists for each show is really every minute over 45 minutes costs a little bit more to the audience. And so the longer it goes, the more thoughtful we are about the content. And the other thing, and this very much gets to what Bobby was saying about All Together Now, pacing matters just as much as length. So because this is a format where people can click away at any moment, I think that does have different implications for pacing. And I will say, just in choosing the clips for this webinar, things that had worked brilliantly within the original form were not effective when we tried to share them for a minute of them in the middle of a webinar, and other things that had more propulsion were more effective. So I think that we generally feel like, as MCC does, that 90 minutes is the outer limit, but I think shorter than 30 people tend to feel like they didn't, it wasn't quite a full experience. More than 90 is really hard, and we think the sweet spot is somewhere in 45 to 60 plus a talk, I would say.
Yeah, one of the things I love
sorry, Sarah, and I should say for a ticketed event, 45 to 60 feels for a ticketed event. The other differentiation between All Together Now and Latitudes is All Together Now is a free offering and Latitudes is a ticketed event. Sarah, go ahead.
That's a great point. One of the things I've been seeing online is that a lot of things that are free, 20 to 30 minutes is great because you can drop in and drop out. Ticketed, as Kristen said, having a little bit more substance makes sense. The other thing is I've seen a lot of events that are 90 minutes, but the program is 60. And then there's this extra talk back or discussion or something, and it gives people an out. And if they're super engaged, they can stay. And I think it's kind of like when you have a talk back after a show, you're really not disappointed when some people leave, they're going to, and then some group stays, and that works really well. We have another question here. And I want to do this one that's in the Q&A first from Ellen. Besides sending notes to friends, what other ways can you get the word out to a broader audience? And I'm going to say one thing, and then I'd love ideas from you guys, but one thing is just to create an invitation or an event on Facebook or something that feels like a happening that people sign up to do and they get reminders about. That's one thing that's worked really well. Do you have other thoughts about how to engage people and how to bring them in, Kristen and Bobby?
Go ahead, Kristen.
Oh, just to say, for Latitudes, we've been advertising through Arts Boston, and that's been really effective. And we've also done a couple of co-promotions with organizations that are adjacent to the content and not in direct competition. So not other organizations that are presenting content, but organizations that have a relationship with that artist. And that has also been really effective. I think, as Sarah said, as we all are experiencing, people are just deluged with possibility. And so having something come in through a trusted source, whether that is a friend or another organization someone has a relationship with, tends to make it just a little bit more important and get greater attention.
Yeah, another thing that is really great on Facebook, and I remember I was saying Facebook isn't always the highest resolution way to share your content, but one of the benefits of it is cross streaming, and another is watch parties. And I don't know if you've ever seen on the screen, there's a little purple camera in the corner. And one thing I like to do is get 4, 6, 10 people to agree that they're going to hold a watch party you can get your board to do it. It just means that they all go on to their own page. They all go on and click watch party. And it means that it then shows up on their page that they're starting a watch party. And if you've ever been on Facebook, someone says they're sunsetting watch parties. We'll do it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because it's
so,
great.
but a non-Facebook dependent version of that. My mom subscribes to a couple of theater subscriptions in the Boston area with friends in the Boston area during normal times. And during COVID, she is going to things with a friend of hers who was in the Peace Corps. They were in the Peace Corps together 50 years ago, and her friend lives in Oakland, California. So people can also find their own ways to share content independent of the platforms. And that actually has been really effective for us with Latitudes. We made it a selling point that people could attend together, and that it would be a way to discover new content, and that a number of our subscribers came to us that way. One person bought, and then they brought a couple of friends with them because they wanted to have the shared experience.
Yeah, I'm having an experience of that right now. I think I mentioned I do some work for Children's Hope India, which is an international charity, and I do fundraisers for them online. And the women who founded it and their board members, they contact their friends and they all get dressed up and they order takeout and they all get on and chat together and then they all go watch together. And so there's a way of creating a sense of a party, just like you would a table at a live event. You create your table. And it is helpful with board members who feel like, I don't know what to do. I can't keep giving emergency funding, like we're not presenting in person. But what if each board member or each artist or each advisor or friend invites 8 people to be in their circle? It's only a 1-hour commitment. We're all ordering Indian food and we're going to watch the Children's Hope India benefit. That kind of circle creating is a way of amplifying and making sure you have core audience. So those are a couple of ideas. We have a question here about how to successfully get donations from viewers. We struggle with how or whether or not to monetize virtual content. Kristen, when we started our Latitude series, one of the things we wanted to do was test monetization and see what we learned. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think, Jody, we struggle with that too. And what we've come to think is that we want to pilot things because we don't know the answer and we don't really think anyone does. So we decided with Latitudes to try a couple of different things and see what was effective so that we were working on a small enough scale financially that we were not at enormous risk, but we were and we were confident enough in the quality of the content that we felt like we could charge subscriptions and tickets. And I would say so we have, within the Latitudes model, we offered subscription sales. We do charge a ticket price. We also do discounted tickets. And we try to be in relationship with as many different organizations as we can to encourage people to join us. And we have found a low ticket price more effective than encouraging donations. Our experience with encouraging donations, because we were trying to encourage people to support the program they were already watching, it was too diffuse. It was not particularly effective. And people generally have been happy to buy a $10 or $15 ticket. We haven't had any pushback with that or any concern. We're clearly it's an arts positive audience and they recognize the need for support. And there hasn't been any question that we're delivering value for that.
I'm yet to see a ticket price above $25 for the virtual space. Maybe somebody else has, but 10, 15, 20 is what people are paying. And it's really painful because 2 people in the same household who normally would buy a $60 ticket are buying one ticket for $20. So it is a different model. I will say, to counter what Kristen said, in a different setting at Arlequin, when Igor did a big experiment and it was clear that he was like buying new equipment and overdoing his studio, and you could see when you watched Natasha that there were expenses incurred and that they were trying to do something with no resources. He decided to do it for free to get the word out and create buzz about that. It was a different kind of program with a different purpose, right? And in that case, donations came in from all over the world that they were going to end in the red and they ended in the black. So I think there's as a caveat, like, what's the purpose of your programming? If it's to bring people together for comfort and connection, they may feel it already and not donate. If you're saying we're onto something, support it so we can do more, maybe donations do work. Another thing about donations I want to say, and then Bobby, I want to see if you have any thoughts about this, and what I'm curious what you give to, because I know that you actually support a lot of theater, Bobby, and arts. And so what makes you give is a really great question. I just want to say, make it as easy as possible. You know, if you're doing it on Facebook, let them give through Facebook. If you have do a Kickstarter, do a GoFundMe, let them text it in on their phone. Whatever way is going to allow people the easiest way to donate so they don't have to do extra steps is good. Bob, thoughts about why you give to what you give to?
Well, I've given to a lot of theaters, both for no content, because I'm a theater person. I know how all the theaters are struggling. Mm-hmm. And I have bought a lot of tickets, and I like to buy, if my husband Bob is going to watch with me, then I buy 2 tickets for the most part. Sometimes one ticket is for the household. I love the idea people are saying they do a household ticket, which I think is a great idea. I think about how much we spend to go to an event, a concert, a play, a movie, etc. And it's much more than what we are having to pay online. And I'm very happy to be online with people because to watch content online, because I feel, as I said before, I have a front row seat. I can look in to the actors or musicians' eyes, right into their soul. So for me, I think a lot of people just don't know about what's out there. I do a lot of searching for what's out there. And I think that that's really important. And I also share a lot with my friends. And for instance, my friend Maurice did a wonderful one-man show based on his teaching in the Boston theater community, Boston Public Schools, excuse me. And I think it was West Hartford theater that presented that. And I just told everybody after I watched it, it was stunning. And I think that was $25. You need to see this piece. You need to support. And so I'm always out there urging people, wow, I just saw this. You need to see it. It's stunning.
And there are some great press, members of the press who are doing virtual performance roundups.
Yeah.
And the Times does things, the Globe does things. You can find things. Jared Bowen on Open Studios has added a section that's a calendar that previews upcoming things. So, if you're not using those resources or pitching to them or sending them your listings, in addition to places like Arts Boston and Stage Source and, calendars, that's a good way to do it. There's a couple comments in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going, Sarah. Just to amplify the point that Tracy and Jonathan were both making in the chat about household tickets. Fabulous to hear that that's working for people. And I think that also just emphasizes what a moment of experimentation this is. And that, just as Bobby was saying, that there's a way that audiences want to be there for artists and for arts organizations. And so I think piloting different ideas and seeing what works best for your specific audience is a really good way to go. I think it's hard to be comfortable with the fact that we don't know the answer in this moment, but there's actually, in our experience, a lot more patience for that because we're all in that boat in different ways.
Yeah, that household ticket is a really great idea, Tracy, to have a different ticket price for the household. It's a very good idea. Maybe we'll steal that.
Yeah.
I know that recently Lisa Wong, who's a violinist in town, with her husband Lin Chang, they did a fundraiser to save a Chinese restaurant that had been important in their family. And they got Yo-Yo Ma, who is a friend, to be part of it. And they had a really creative way of raising money, which was they played. You could buy a ticket. You could also order dinner and not watch. You could also bid on things. Like they did a whole bunch of creative things to monetize something, which is just worth mentioning. Bobby, did you want to say something? Because I have a couple other questions, but I don't want to.
No, I just was seeing this question, how do you respond to virtual theater programming fatigue?
Yeah.
Which is a really good question.
And Sarah, I'm just going to flag that we're close to time here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk for a minute about this virtual theater programming fatigue question. And then maybe we'll move to close. But it is a question. You all came today, though, right? After being on Zoom forever. So my 2 cents is find people who are going to be really interested, make them interested, invite them, and don't make it too long. What would you say, Kristen?
I think that sounds like great advice. Yeah.
I think the asynchronous option is also good. People can watch whenever. Do you have any thought about that, Bobby, about how to deal with fatigue?
Get some rest. No,
Mama Bobby says get some rest.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's
okay.
all.
Okay. Great. So we love these questions. You're welcome to reach out to us and to each other after this. And as we've said a couple of times, I know the MCC sends an email after this that lists resources, and we will pull your ideas and our ideas and put them into that list. We wanted to just recap a little bit of what we heard today and talked about today. And then we're going to invite our colleagues from the MCC to say a few things about what's coming up. And we're going to close with a piece of art with one final performance for you. So just to come back to what we talked about at the beginning, embrace limitations and possibilities. There are tools and opportunities, which we just talked about a bunch of in the virtual performance space that aren't available live. They're exciting. There is a potential for this not to be a replacement for live. There's an opportunity for this to be a new genre where you make things that work for this environment and have audiences from around the world, things like that. Number two, this idea of creating live experience goes way beyond the content you are putting out. I think we've done it today, even in the chat. We've created a shared experience. Don't be bound. And I think that means a lot of things Kristen raised today, actually. Do a different format, do a different length, do it at a different time. You know, try experiment with a couple different things, do pilots, and listen to your artists. They have things that they want to say right now that matter, and it might take a different kind of support. Try it. And then where do I start? I say, get online, upload something, try to stream it, figure it out, Google, ask your friends, but don't say, I just don't know how to do it, so I'm just not doing it, because there's opportunity there for you. And it seems scary. And once you start, you figure it out. And honestly, I truly cannot work my remote. So I am living proof that you can learn this if it's for you. And we're glad you joined us for those talking about those 4 topics and were with us today. We're all in this together, and it's been great to do it for a year and see what comes over the next year as we maybe move more into hybrid. And also thank you to the Mass Cultural Council for giving us the chance to do this and doing this whole series. Kaylin, do you want to come on and talk for a minute about other things the MCC is doing before we play our final clip?
Yes, hello. Thank you all for a great conversation and everyone engaged in the chat too. I just want to invite you all to join us for our other Recover, Rebuild, and Renew sessions this spring. The next one is actually next Tuesday, April 6th, called Operating in a Changing World. It's part 1 of a 2-part series. And it kicks off a series of financial management sessions with a nonprofit finance fund, which are going to continue for the next couple of months. And Sarah is going to be back for a session on virtual fundraising in the time of COVID-19 on May 27th. So be sure to join us for that one as well. And in the meantime, follow up with Broadband Collaborative. Their website is right on the screen, so don't hesitate to do that. And now I'm going to hand it back to our presenters to show us that last piece of art, and I'm really excited to see that.
Thank you, Kaylin. So we want to close with a piece from the pipa player Wu Man's Latitudes show, Playing at the Borderlines, because we think it's an especially beautiful illustration of work created for and in the virtual world. It's an excerpt of a piece called From the Yangtze to the Mississippi Delta, the across-water call of a string-born song, created by Reggie Gibson and Wu Man, with animation and editing by Justin LaHue. This is also a piece created by 2 artists who have not yet met in the real world, one in California and one in Massachusetts. This video shows a Chinese woman wearing a red shirt and scarf, playing a Chinese lute, the pipa, and a Black man wearing a black shirt and hat, reciting a poem. Please enjoy. And on behalf of Bobby and Sarah and myself, thank you so much for hanging out with us this afternoon.
Decades later, another exiled poet, Bai Juyi, would meet that same girl, now a woman on that same river. She, also in exile from her former life. Her fingers are now sorrow-wise on the pipa's strings as it sits like a tear in her lap. Bai Juyi offers wine. She plays the pipa, and in her music the 2 of you connect across time, Her music is the splatter of rain. It is the clatter of jumbled notes, each falling like a pearl on a platter of jade. Perhaps upon hearing her, the both of you imagine the many women you've loved. Perhaps each of you imagines himself to be an emperor forgetting a kingdom, longing to get lost in a woman's hair. A woman's hair as black as the insides of wine-shut eyelids. I wonder if in that moment the both of you knew that a millennia from your now, how the faint camphor smoke of that song would be carried to a faraway land and river. How it would conjure scenes like those you've seen along the Yangtze. Scenes of ancient grandfathers sweating and toiling beneath straw hats, their bent backs aching and arching over crops, their sun-darkened arms now made muscular fire from years of planting and chopping and clearing mile after mile of sugarcane and cotton. And that, like the two of you, when night finds them, they too will sit down next to a moving body of slow water, offer libations beneath that same moon. As in the distance, a string-born song quivers in the flower-censored dark, quivers like a woman's black hair.